So the ontological ethics is also known as the ethics of duty. Okay? If for Aristotle, for you to become an ethical person is to practice virtue, to practice the midpoint between excess and deficiency, here in the ontological ethics, we are dealing with duty as a means to be an ethical person. Okay? So deontology is the study of the nature of duty and obligation. The word duty comes from the Greek word dei, okay? Meaning it is necessary. You must also note that the word God, the English word God, in Latin, God is Deus. And the Latin word Deus is derived from precisely this also Greek Dei. Since traditionally in metaphysics and Christian philosophy, God is a necessary being. So some historical background. The brand of deontology that we will be discussing today comes from Immanuel Kant. Okay. Immanuel Kant is a Prussian philosopher, German philosopher, and bulk of our discussion this morning will be taken from Grundlegung zur Metaphysik der Sitte, or in English, the foundation of the metaphysics of morals. Here, Kant is aiming to have a principle of morality that is applicable to all. Meaning, kay Kristiyano ka or hindi, kay German ka or hindi, this will apply to you. So let's see what Kant aims in his work. Here is a direct quotation from the Grundlegung, the work of Kant. Since my aim here is directed properly to moral philosophy, I limit the question proposed to this. Is it not of the utmost necessity to work out for once a pure moral philosophy? Okay? So here, Kant is saying, let's have a moral philosophy that is really philosophy. Okay? Hindi tainted ng religion, hindi tainted ng culture, but a pure moral philosophy. Completely cleansed of everything that may be only empirical and that belongs to anthropology. Okay? Everyone must grant that a law, if it is to hold morally, that is as a ground of an obligation, must carry with it absolute necessity. Okay? Again, what Kant says is that you want to be an ethical person, then let us follow a certain law. And this law will be our foundation for action. Okay? And whenever we do this or follow this law, it is to be absolutely necessary. Meaning, kahit anong circumstances, you are to follow this law. Okay? That, for example, the command, thou shalt not lie, does not hold only for human beings as if other rational beings did not have to lead it. The ground of obligation here must not be sought in the nature of human being or in the circumstances of the world in which he is placed, but a priori simply in the concepts of pure reason. Here, Kant is saying that whatever law we follow in being an ethical person, we follow it, okay, because we are bound to do it. For example, yung thou shalt not lie, there are some who would say that it's okay to lie if it is just a white lie. Okay? It's okay to lie as long as that expression of lying deals, for example, with keeping relationships. Okay? I'm sure some of us, if not all, have experiences of lying so as to save ourselves from the judgment of others. Okay? Or to impress other people, we lie. Okay? Um, but for Kant, no, lying is wrong simply because it is not part of our duty as persons to lie. Later on, i-clarify natin what Kant means by duty. Okay? Dito, bahagyan niyang kinikriticize yung Christianity. No? Dapat daw, the ground of obligation here must not be sought in the nature of human being. Now remember, if we go back to Confucianism rather, si Mencius, no, he would say that the person is innately good and therefore the person is capable of doing good things. No, yung opposite naman, the person is bad, the person is selfish, and therefore the law is needed so as to temper the bad side of humans. For Immanuel Kant, Kant would dismiss of such idea. Okay? Let us not talk whether man is good or not, whether a woman is good or not. Let's talk about duty as means to become an ethical person. Okay? Yung second red part nitong slide na to, okay? We should simply derive ethics a priori. No? If you forgot, no, a priori means truths derived from reason. Okay? When we say truths derived from reason, hindi kailangan ng experience para malaman mo na mali yung gagawin mo. Okay? So for example, ano ang isang example ng a priori statement? Ang classic example ko sa klase, you cannot be both here and not here at the same time. Hindi pwedeng nandito ako at hindi rin ako nandito at the same time. It's a violation of simple scientific law. Hindi mo kailangan ng experience para malaman na imposible yung sinasabi ko. No? You can simply know it a priori. Now, what Kant is trying to say here is that if we talk of morality, we can also talk of morality a priori. Okay? Remember, yung opposite kasi nitong deontology, no, yung consequentialism, okay, or utilitarianism. Utilitarians would say that you will know that you are doing an ethical thing if marami ang nakaka-benefit. Regardless kung masama o mabuti yung gawin mo, as long as everyone benefits from it, then it is ethical. For Kant, no, hindi na natin dapat pag-usapan kung ano yung ibubunga. Because we can already know the morality of things dun pa lang sa mismong paggawa ng bagay na yan. Okay, later on, we will expound on that. Okay. The present groundwork is, however, nothing more than the search for an establishment of the supreme principle of morality. Okay? So, what Kant is doing here is that he is very bold, okay, in taking on this huge task. Okay? What Kant is saying is that pwedeng magkaroon ng moralidad na pareho, no? Kay alipin ka. Now remember, the timeline of Kant was during a time na pinapayagan ng slavery. The time of Kant was a time when the church, okay, though slowly losing its moral power, has still the say about morality. So what Kant is saying here is that baka pwede tayong makapagbigay ng moralidad na sakop lahat ng tao. Okay. So the Grundlegung, Kant's work on ethics, Sabi ni Kant, merong 4 na criteria for a rational philosophy. Okay? Number 1, the basis should be pure reason. Not religion, not feelings, but pure reason. Number 2, the source must be goodwill. Okay? You want to be an ethical person, you want to have a rational moral philosophy, then the inclination, okay, to do good must be born out of goodwill. No? Mabuting kalooban. Okay? Number 3, respect for the law. Okay? In ethics, isa sa mga cliche sa ethics ay not everything that is legal is moral. And not everything that is legal is necessarily moral. Okay? But there are certain laws. Okay? There are certain laws that may jive with morality, with reason. And number 4, the motive must be duty. Okay? Saglit lang ha, may nagjo-join. I'll just accept.
Sir, question po.
Yes, sige. Sure.
Sir, hindi po ba ang goodwill ay somehow subjective pa rin based on a person and dun sa person na magre-receive or yung recipient ng goodwill na yon?
Okay, that you are correct in saying so, but Kant has a different notion of what goodwill is. No? Later on, I'll explain that. Okay? Thanks for the question.
Thank you po.
Okay, I'm just trying to accept more people. Okay, sige, let's continue. And then the motive must be duty. Later on, we will clarify itong mga terms na to, no? Yung naka-red. Okay? Now, Kant is saying na you want to be an ethical person, then you must do your duty. Okay? Now, how do we understand this? Kant gives us 3 formulations of what he calls the categorical imperative. Okay? Pag sinabing categorical imperative, di ba? Imperative, no? We learned that in basic English. An imperative sentence is a sentence that commands you to do something. Okay? Now, when Kant attaches the word categorical to imperative, he means that yes, it is a duty, it is a command, but it must be necessary for you. Meaning, imperative siya, utos siya, pero kinakailangan mong gawin no matter what. Okay? Now, how do we know what the categorical imperative is? Number 1, okay, we must be able to universalize whatever the duty to be tested is. Okay, so for example, tama ba ang magnakaw in all circumstances? Okay? Or is it moral for you to lie in all circumstances? Okay? Ngayon, ang isang test ni Kant para matingnan kung moral yung ginagawa mo or hindi is to universalize the thing to be tested. So for example, pagnanakaw. Okay? Later on, I will teach you how to universalize. Number 2 is human as an end itself. You want to be moral person, then one categorical imperative is you should treat the person as an end, not as a mean. Okay? So for example, kung ginagamit mo lang yung kaibigan mo, no, para pumasa sa isang subject, no, nagiging user ka lang, then you are treating that friend of yours as a means and not as an end. Okay? Ano mo lang siya, funnel mo lang siya, no, para pumasa or may makuha kang benefit. Or in a grand scale, no, kapag ang politiko, no, ginagamit lamang niya ang kanyang constituents para to serve his or her personal interests, then he is not being a moral person for Immanuel Kant. And number 3 is autonomy. Now, the word autonomy comes from 2 Greek words, autos and nomos. Autos means self. Nomos means law. Okay? Meaning self-rule. You are becoming an ethical person if you are doing things because you believe and you think that it is the right thing to do. Tayo, no, we may have encountered or experienced, and some of us are continually experiencing peer pressure, di ba? We do things kasi you are pressured by outside forces. That is not autonomy. Okay? Autonomy is, yes, maybe nakikita mo na ginagawa ng iba, but you are convinced na whether ginagawa yan ng iba, yun yung tama. Because I see it as moral. Okay? So let's, how would Kant answer these questions? A student asks, why must I study? What can I do to motivate myself to study? A local government official asks, why should I not accept a bribe? A husband asks, why should I remain faithful to my wife? A board examinee asks, ba't hindi ako mag-resort sa leakage? Or a child asks, why should I develop my talents? Bottom line, or the gist of these questions, bakit ko kailangan gawin yung tama? Kant would give a simple answer, no? Because it is the right thing to do. No? If you would summarize the entire teachings of Kant, no? Moral teachings of Kant, bakit mo kailangan gawin yung tama? Kasi yun yung tama. Okay? Kung ano yung tama, anong ibig sabihin ni Kant sa right thing to do, we will ihimayin natin, no, ng isa-isa. Okay. So let me highlight, because it is the right thing to do. Ano nga ba yung right thing? For Kant, the phrase right thing is the moral law within. Kant believes that because we are persons, and persons are rational beings, because we are such, there is within us, in our reason, that is able to dictate kung ano yung tama. That is what meant by the phrase, the moral law within. Hindi yan yung feeling ko tama ito. No, that's not what the moral law within means. The moral law within means reason is able to dictate to you kung ano yung moral. Okay? So here is a phrase from Kritik der reinen Vernunft. 2 things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and steadily we reflect upon them. The starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Okay? Dalawa lang daw yung importante para kay Kant. No? Sciences, the starry heavens above me, and ethics, the moral law within me. Okay? Trivia about Kant. No? Kant was a very short guy. No? I think 4'11". At malapad, no, yung noo niya. No, malapat. That is how people of his time would describe him. And Kant was a very rigid person. No? Lahat ng gagawin niya kalkulado. No? There is this famous story about Kant. No? Kant would take a walk in the afternoon every day for the rest of his life. 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock or 5, basta hapon, no? Yung palubog yung araw. Maglalakad siya sa labas ng kanyang yard. No? He would walk to and fro, and anecdotes tell us that what Kant produced in his lifetime is brought by those walks in the afternoon. Okay? Of course, hindi lang si Kant yung ganong big guy in philosophy. No? Si Albert Einstein, for example, Einstein would walk from Princeton to his home. Medyo malayo yun. And for Einstein, it is non-negotiable. Sabi kasi ni Einstein, doon niya nakukuha yung kanyang inaaral, yung kanyang napoproduce. Same also with Kant. No? Kant was doing those scheduled ang buhay ni Kant, kumbaga. Kant is a very important figure in philosophy. Some would say that after Socrates and Plato, Kant was the next big thing in philosophy. Okay? Si Kant ang Copernicus ng philosophy. Remember, Copernicus revolutionized science because he is the first guy to systematically say that the Earth revolves around the sun. Okay? Sa philosophy naman, Kant is the Copernicus of philosophy. No? For many reasons. No? Ethics is one of those. Okay? So, trivia lang about Kant. Now, duty as motive. Kant brings up the problem of the moral worth of actions. Okay? What makes an action moral? Okay? Sabi ni Kant, in order for us to derive what actions are moral, we need to distinguish the things we do from duty versus the things we do merely in conformity with duty. Okay? Iba yung alam mo sa sarili mo, for example, na tungkulin mong maghugas ng pinggan sa bahay nyo. Okay? Versus sa napipilitan kang maghugas ng pinggan kasi tungkulin mo. Iba yung feeling or yung thinking ng tao na kaya niya ginagawa yung bagay na ito because alam niyang tama iyon from the very start. So yun yung from duty. Versus sa taong ginagawa niya yung bagay na yun dahil ito yung sinasabi ng lipunan. So, para kay Kant, ano yung mas may moral worth? Yung from duty. Okay? Kasi yung merely in conformity with duty, hindi siya autonomous. Nakikibagay ka lang eh. Okay? So from duty ang may moral worth para kay Kant. Okay? An action from duty, here is again a quote from the Grundlegung, an action from duty has its moral worth not in the end that is supposed to be attained by it. Okay? So, hindi ako mag-cheat kasi ayokong mahuli ng teacher. Ayokong ma-OSA. Ayokong ma-student disciplinary tribunal. For Kant, you want to be a moral person? Then do not think of that. Do not think of the outcome. Okay? Nor do not think of the aim. No? Mag-aaral ako ng mabuti para mag-honors ako. For Kant, no. That is just secondary. Okay? But rather in the maxim in accordance with which it is resolved upon. So sabi ni Kant, you want to know whether you are doing the right thing? Then check if your maxim. No? Maxim can be synonymous to slogan, okay, or personal rule. Then check if your maxim, okay, relies on the principle of volition. That worth depends not on the actuality of the object of the action, yung outcome, but merely on the principle of the volition. Pagkukusa, volition, in accordance with which the action is done without regard to any object of the faculty of desire. Okay? Gagawin mo tong tamang bagay na ito, not because you desire something, but because in the mere performance of the duty, there is goodness. There is rectification. Dun pa lang sa paggawa ng duty na yan. Okay? So how can I? So the question is, paano ko ma-figure out ano yung duty? Okay? By using the universalizability procedure to test the rightness and wrongness of action. Okay? So, ito medyo methodic to, no? Parang math, no? May method tayo. So, merong 4 steps. Step 0 is to identify the action to be tested. Okay? Then, the next step, step 1, formulate the maxim. Yung maxim parang personal rule mo, personal slogan mo. Okay? Kaya lang may format siya, no? When I ano yung I? When I, for example, when I want to pass my subject, I shall study. Then test for universalizability. Imagine the maxim as a universal law. So meron kang personal rule, di ba? Try to imagine that your personal rule becomes a universal law na dapat lahat kailangan gawin niyo. Okay? Is there a self-contradiction? Then conclude by articulating the duty. Okay? Example, okay? So ito ay direct quote from the Grundlegung. Okay? Let me check. Jojo Terrenal, can you unmute and read what is on the slide? Are you there? Jojo Terrenal?
Yeah. Universality test demonstrated 1 of 3. Another man finds himself urged by need to borrow money. He well knows that he will not be able to repay it, but sees also nothing will be lent him unless he promises firmly to repay it within a determinate time. He would like to make such a promise, but he still has enough conscience to ask himself, is it not forbidden and contrary to duty to help oneself out of need in such a way? Supposing that he still decided to do so, his maxim of action would go as follows. When I believe myself to be in need of money, I shall borrow money and promise to repay it, even though I know that this will never happen.
Okay, thank you. So again, no, balikan natin yung steps, di ba? The steps say, thank you, you can mute already. You can mute na. Steps, yung unang 2 steps, identify the action to be tested and then formulate the maxim. Okay? So dito, ano yung action to be tested? No? The action to be tested is borrowing money without intending to pay. Okay? So, yan, no? Gusto niyang manghiram ng pera, okay, but parang ayaw niya rin magbayad. Okay? So that's step 0. Okay? Tapos, step 1 is to formulate the maxim. So ito yun. When I believe myself to be in need of money, I shall borrow money. No? When I shall borrow money and promise to repay it, even though I know that this will never happen. Okay? Okay, can you read the next slide? Sophia, can you read the next slide, please? Quintana. Oh, mukhang wala. Luceno, Miss Luceno, can you read?
Now this principle of self-love or personal advantage is perhaps quite consistent with my whole future welfare. But the question now is whether it is right. I therefore turn the demand of self-love into a universal law and put the question as follows. How would it be if my maxim became a universal law? I then see at once that it could never hold as a universal law of nature and be consistent with itself, but must necessarily contradict itself.
Um, Continue.
For the universal for the universality of a law that everyone, when he believes himself to be in need, would promise whatever he pleases with the intention of not keeping it, would make the promise and the end one might have in itself impossible. Since no one would believe that since no one would believe what was promised him, but would laugh at all such expressions as vain pretenses.
Okay, thank you. Kindly mute yourself. Okay, so what Kant is saying here is that, remember, no? Again, na-formulate na natin yung maxim, no? When I want to borrow a money, when I believe myself to be in need of money, I shall borrow money and promise to repay it, even though I know that this will never happen. Okay? So yung test 2, imagine the maxim as if it were a universal law. Meaning, lahat ng tao, pag kailangan nila ng pera, manghihiram sila even though without intending to pay. Okay? Law yun. Lahat dapat. Okay? So sabi rito ni Kant, pagtatawanan ka lang. No? No one would lend you money. Kasi batas yun eh. Na kapag manghihiram ka ng pera, hindi ka magbabayad. Okay? So, walang na magpapahiram sa'yo ng pera. Okay? Now, so let's do it step by step. No? Borrow money without intending to pay. Okay? When I need money, I shall borrow it from someone without intending to pay it back. Suppose everyone were obligated to follow this maxim as if it were a universal law. Everyone ought to borrow money without intending to pay when they need money. Okay? So, ang sunod na step is, tingnan mo, meron bang contradiction kapag naging batas yung maxim mo? Okay? No one will lend you money. Diba? Sinong niloloko mo? Alam kong hindi ka magbabayad kasi batas yan. Okay? Then, money lending loses its meaning. So, it's self-contradictory. Wala nang magpapahiram sa'yo kasi batas yun na hindi ka mababayaran. Okay? What then is the resulting duty? Therefore, do not borrow money without intending to pay. Okay? Now, observations. Kailangan consistent yung step 0 to 3 or tawag namin tuhog. Okay? Kant provides a maxim that has a specific formulation. When, situation, I shall, action. Okay? Universalized maxim does not mean it is imagined as done by everyone, but it is imagined as an obligation for everyone. The test involves not consequences. No? Kung mapapansin nyo kanina, hindi sinabi ni Kant na maling humiram ng pera without intending to pay back kasi maghihirap yung money lending loses its essence. What is the essence of money lending? You borrow money, You borrow money and then you pay back. That's the essence of money lending. Ngayon, pag ginawa mong batas, no, na lahat ng uutang ay hindi magbabayad, then the obligation does not make sense. Okay? The test involves not consequences, but the internal validity of the universalized maxim. Okay? So, again, step by step, identify the action to be tested. Okay? For example, lying to my parents when asking where did I come from after arriving past my curfew. Okay? Formulate the maxim. No? When I shall. If the maxim were a universal law, meron bang self-contradiction? Again, not consequences, but self-contradiction. If there is a contradiction, kagaya ng money lending example ni Kant, then the action is wrong. If there is no contradiction, then the action is right. Okay? We do not test general actions, no? But we test specific actions. For example, to your resume. Okay? The test is not that everyone actually did it, but everyone were obligated to do it as if it were a law. Okay? Again, what we're testing is not the consequences. So, universalizability procedure is not the same as golden rule. Kung ayaw mong gawin sa'yo, wag mong gawin sa iba. It's not the same as universalizability. Okay? Okay? Let's have some practice. Now, I'll do the first one, and then I'll randomly call persons in the room to do the second one by voice na lang. Okay? So stealing someone's valuables. Okay? I'll switch to Microsoft Word. Before I do it, meron bang question so far? Are there questions so far before I do the exercise? Okay. Okay, so let's try, no? Okay, so step 0 is stealing someone's valuables. Ano kayang reason? Bakit gusto mong mag-steal? Because I envy them. Yan, naiinggit ka. Okay? Step 1 is to formulate the maxim. Okay? When I am envious of someone, I shall steal their valuables. Okay? When I shall. Okay? Then, step 2, formulate the duty. Okay? Universalize the maxim rather. Okay? Everyone ought to steal someone's valuables when they are envious of them. Okay? Now, the step after 2 is check for contradiction. Okay? Meron kayong contradiction? Of course, no? It's very obvious. No? Ano kayang contradiction? Okay? Again, we're not testing for consequences. We're testing for whether the law makes sense. Okay? So, what can we do here? Maybe we could say that private ownership loses its meaning. Okay? I will not dare to own something because others would steal it as long as they are envious of me. Diba? To own something loses its meaning. Kasi sabi sa batas, basta may mainggit lang sa akin, pwede na akong nakawan. Okay? So step 3 is to articulate the duty. Therefore, do not steal someone's valuables if one is envious of them. Okay? So that very simple, no? Very simple. Now, gusto ko lang i-point out, no, na paano yung tuhog? Sabi ko kanina, kailangan yung steps 0 to 3, kailangan tuhog. Okay? So, tingnan nyo. Dito sa 1, when I am envious of someone, I shall steal their valuables. Okay? Tuhog siya sa 0. Bakit? Kasi ginamit ko ulit yung mga term na stealing someone's valuables, envy. Okay? Tapos dito, the same terms I used. When I am envious of someone, I shall steal their valuables. Tapos sa step 2, tuhog pa rin. Bakit? Okay? Because I still use the same terms. No? Steal someone's valuables, envy. Okay? Sa step 3, tuhog pa rin because I still use the same terms. Do not steal someone's valuables, envy. Okay? So that's an example. Okay. Let's see. Sinong tatawagin ko? Lester Susano. Ayaw, ito problema. Ayan, Lester.
Yes, sir.
Try nga natin yung, sa voice na lang. Lying about credentials. Nakikita mo yung slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, lying about credentials in a CV. Kailan ka bakit ka maglalay sa credentials sa CV mo? Ano kayang mangyayari?
Which, sir?
Anong curriculum vitae, resume? When does someone usually lie about their resume?
Para po mas ma-impress yung employer.
Okay. So try mong gawin ngayon yung steps. Bigyan ko yung example nung kay Kant. So what is step 0 kaya?
Sir, pabalik nga doon sa sir.
Yeah. Lying about credentials.
Lying about.
So ang gagawin mo, you adopt that phrase and then put some flavor. When I say flavor, yung sabi mo, to impress. So what could be step 0?
To impress the employer, I lie about my credentials.
Wala pa tayo step 1. Wala pa tayo step 1.
Wala pa pala.
Action to be tested. Step 0.
Lying about credentials in CV. Leads someone to impress a employer.
Okay. Sige, i-revise natin ng kaunti. Lying about credentials in a CV when you want to impress your employer. Okay? Good. Sige. Mute yourself. I will call another one for step 1. Shane. Shane nga ba ito? Malabayabas. Okay, so sabi niya step 0 is lying about credentials in a CV when you want to impress the employer. So what could be step 1? Shane.
When I need to impress my employer, I shall lie in my credentials in my CV.
Okay, revise natin ng kaunti. So sabi ni Shane, when I want to impress my employer, I shall lie about my credentials in my CV. Okay? So again, so tuhog pa, no? Step 0 to 1. Okay, can you mute yourself? Let's call Christine Ann Lerio. Wala. Dat pala nakabukas yung mga camera niya, tapos kung sino naka-green. Flores, Matthew. Try number 2, step 2. Try lang.
Ano po, sir?
Step 2.
Yung ano po. Wait lang.
So, again. So, sabi ni...
Everyone will lie about their credentials in CV when they want to impress their employer.
Okay. The keyword here is the word ought. Okay? Or should. Okay? So, medyo soft yung everyone will. Okay? Kasi, inclination yun ng loob eh. So, again, reformulate using the word ought or should. Depende sa'yo.
Everyone should lie about their credentials in their curriculum vitae when they want to impress their employer.
Okay, good. So, everyone ought to lie about their credentials in CV when they want to impress their employer. So, before we move to step 3, okay, you test for contradiction. Okay? So, paano mo kaya iti-test yan? Thank you. You can mute already. Seth, Lahara.
Sir, there will be contradiction po. Kasi, hello? Ay. There will be contradiction because people who would want to impress their employer would keep on lying sa CV nila, and the CV will lose its meaning.
Okay, so the CV will lose its meaning, no? Because the CV supposedly contains your fitness for the job. Okay? So, if you lie about your CV, your credentials, then what is at question is your capability for the job. And that would mean chaos for the company. No? If you get hired, isipin nyo na lang, no, kung may hinire na philosophy professor. Tapos, sabi niya, cum laude pa siya sa philo. Pero hindi naman talaga siya nag-philo. Okay? So, the subject will suffer. Of course, we're not after the consequences, no? What we're after is the contradiction. But, you know, when we think futuristic, yan yung mangyayari. No? So that's the beauty of Immanuel Kant. No? He does not mind of consequences, but kapag ginawa mo yung bagay na tama, no? You already avoid the wrong consequences in the future. Okay? So the last step is to articulate the duty. No? Let's see. Javier. Step 3.
Sir. Therefore, if you want to impress your employer, do not lie about your CV.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the next example. Refusing to give a bribe, taking a ticket. Okay. Sino to si Jermaine? Parang di ko kilala. Are you using alias? Sino to? Sino ka, Jermaine?
Jermaine Valeria po. Sorry po, di po pa nabago.
Okay. Sige. So, our problem or our next test case is refusing to give a bribe, taking a ticket. Okay? So, balik tayo. Yan. So, articulate 0. So, kailan ka usually nagre-refuse to take a ticket and instead give a bribe?
Pag nasisita po ng traffic enforcer.
Okay. So, could you formulate 0, step 0?
Refusing to take a ticket. Wait, what? Refusing to take a ticket in order to get bribe.
Oh, hindi ko yung magkakaroon ng bribe. Sabi mo, refusing to take a ticket in order to get a bribe? Parang yun yung sinabi mo?
Refusing to take a bribe instead of taking, but instead taking a ticket.
Lagyan mo ng sitwasyon. Parang yung ginawa natin sa bullet 2.
Refusing to give a bribe to a traffic enforcer and instead taking the ticket.
Ticket. Kailan? When? Lagyan mo ng situation. Yung flavor. Kagaya nung sa bullet 2, no? Sabi kanina, lying about credentials in a CV when I want to impress an employer.
Refusing to give a bribe to a traffic enforcer instead taking a ticket when I violate a traffic law.
Okay? So, pasimplihin natin. Refusing to give a bribe, taking a ticket when I violated a traffic law. That's simple. Okay, thank you. Next step. Step 1. Okay, formulate the maxim. Run Manansala.
When I violate a traffic law, I shall bribe instead of taking a ticket.
Oh, hindi yun yung 0.
Ay, sir, akala ko sabi mo 1 na.
Kaya nga, ba't yung 0? Tuhog dapat. Ano yung 0? Refusing to give a bribe and taking a ticket when I violate a traffic law. That was 0. So ano yung 1?
When I violate a traffic law, I will refuse to take a bribe. I will refuse to bribe.
Okay.
And take a ticket.
Okay. So, when I violate a traffic law, I shall refuse to bribe and take the ticket. Okay? Okay. Sige. Step 2. Thank you. Sino pang pwedeng matawa? Sino si Anira? I do not know you. Is that an alias? Anira, are you listening? Wala. Sino pang nandito? Lubiano. Okay, can you try number 2? Number 2, naka-unmute ka na. Ayaw magsalita. Ayaw magsalita. Sige, I'll call another one. Makarambon, Agong.
Po.
Number
Rinig
2,
po.
try. Yes, I can hear you.
Everyone ought to refuse to pay a bribe or pay
Refuse.
a ticket
Okay.
to violate a traffic law.
Okay, revise natin. Everyone ought to refuse giving a bribe and taking ticket instead when violating a traffic law. Okay, so that could be one. Okay, thank you. Next step. Next step is step 3. Before step 3, are there contradictions? Let's call Merit. Michael. Ayaw mag-unmute. Jolo.
Sir?
Yeah. Test for contradiction. So, yung law natin, yung universalized maxim is, everyone ought to refuse giving a bribe and taking a ticket instead when violating a traffic law. So, that's the universalized maxim. So, itong step na. Sige,
yes,
go.
Sir. So, I don't think there is any contradiction to that, sir, because
okay.
The usual is when you violate a traffic law, there is consequence. No, there's like the normal thing that will happen is that you take a ticket. So
okay.
There is no contradiction to that because that's what usually happens in our situation.
Okay, good. There is no contradiction. No? Bakit? No? Again, let me highlight yung slide ko kanina. No? How do you arrive at a rational moral philosophy? No? I would like to highlight 3. No? Respect for law. But not all the time. No? Because some provisions of the law, the civil law, are morally questionable. Okay? So, right. Your Jolo was right in saying that there is no contradiction. So, what could be the resulting duty? No? So, uulitin mo lang yung step 2, no? Yung universalized maxim. Therefore, refuse to give a bribe and take a ticket instead when violating a traffic law. Okay? So, that. Okay. So let me go back to my slides after our practice, our tests. Okay? What is meant by the binding force of reason? No? Kailangan kasi yung bago ka pumunta sa step 3, no? Kailangan yung test for internal validity must be bound by reason. Okay? What does Kant mean here? Para ka lang nag-1 + 1 = 2. Okay? Ibig sabihin, kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin, what is 1 + 1? Ay, sir, heartbroken ako, so 1.5 lang po ngayong araw. Hindi naman pwedeng ganun. Diba? So, 1 + 1 = 2 is true in all circumstances. Whether galit ka or hindi, whether heartbroken ka or hindi, whoever, whenever, wherever it is claimed. So ganun ka-daring yung gustong gawin ni Kant. Kant was trying to give us an ethical theory that can be claimed universally true whenever, whoever, wherever it is claimed. Okay? Okay? So what is the internal validity of the moral command, do not borrow money without intending to pay? Okay? The internal validity is, it is universally true. It is thus always true. Whoever claims it, whenever and wherever it is claimed. Okay? So, sabi ko kanina, ang gusto ni Kant is to arrive at a categorical imperative. Okay? When we say categorical imperative, susundin mo yung command Because, susundin mo yung command whenever, wherever, whoever does it. Samantala yung hypothetical imperative, if the action would be good merely as a means to something else, the imperative is hypothetical. Anong ibig sabihin yan? You only follow an imperative because you would benefit something from it. Okay? For example, hindi ka magnanakaw kasi ayaw mong makulong ka. That is a hypothetical imperative. Why? Because yung hindi mo pagnanakaw, it is only a means to save yourself from incarceration. Samantalang pag sinabing categorical imperative, hindi ka magnanakaw kasi mali yun. Okay? In all circumstances. Okay? Kahit na gutom ka, okay? Kahit na walang-wala ka, you will not steal. Okay? Kasi mali yun. Kasi yun yung tama. Hindi dahil ayaw mong makulong, hindi dahil ayaw mong mahusgahan ng iba. Okay? Secondary lang yan para kay Kant. You will not steal or you will not make utang tas di mo babayaran, hindi dahil sa consequence, but because it is in itself good. Okay? Wala nang ibang criteria. Okay? So ito yung kanina, no? Number 1, act only in accordance with that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. Okay? So gawin mo lang yung mga bagay na kung magiging universal law siya, ay applicable sa lahat. Okay? Number 2, so act that you use humanity whether in your own person or in a person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. So here's a number 2, ano ang glaring example na mali, contrary sa number 2? Slavery. Because you're using the person as a means and not as an end. Because if you're using the person as an end, you will not enslave the person. Huh? You have a girlfriend, but you're using your girlfriend only as a means. Either may pangyabang ka sa tropa mo, okay? Or para may maging source ka ng gratification. Okay? Tinutulungan mo lagi yung professor mo magbuhat ng gamit niya, no? Lalo na yung matatanda. No? Kasi gusto mong manotice ka para pag nag-record ng grades, eh may dagdag ganda points ka or pogi points ka. That is violation of number 2. Because you're using the professor as a mean and never as an end. Number 3, act so that your will is thus not solely subject to the law, but is subject in such a way that it must be regarded also as legislating to itself. Kumilos ka, hindi dahil may batas. Okay? But you act because you want to train yourself to follow that which is right. Okay? Legislating to itself. Autonomy. Okay? Why must I do the right thing to do? Sabi ni Kant, or if we are to creatively summarize the entire ethical theory of Kant, because it is the right thing to do. And that, my class, is what is meant by dignity. Okay? To have principles. Na kahit gutom ka or hindi ka magnanakaw. Na kahit alanganin ka na sa isang subject mo or hindi, ano ba yung subject na lagi niya? Yung 11, kung tawagin? Na kahit alanganin ka na doon, you will not cheat. Because you know that the principle is it's wrong to do so. That is what dignity means. Okay? The opposite of dignity ay presyo. No? Minsan ginagawa natin yung mga bagay because there's a prize. There's a reward at the end of the rainbow. There's a pot of gold. The opposite of which is price. Kapag sinabi mong, I must do the right thing because I will get something from it, or I will avoid something for doing the right thing, nilalagyan mo ng presyo yung paggawa ng tama. Kant is saying, go back to dignity. So we could say that hypothetical imperative. We could say that these are price imperatives. Because you only do the good thing because there's a price. May kapalit. But if you do the right thing, just because you do it for its own sake, dahil yun yung tama, then these are imperatives filled with dignity. Okay? How shall I do the right thing? In an autonomous manner. Autonomous, again, self-rule, without the influence of others. Okay? Para mas maintindihan natin yung autonomy pattern, yung autonomy, we can compare it with the word paternalism. Okay? Paternalism is subordinate to them in the subordinate supposed best interest. Di ba pag bata tayo, paternalism eh. Ng mga bata tayo, paternal yung ating framework, yung mindset. Di ba? Bakit mo gagawin yung tama? Kasi sabi ng tatay ko eh. Bakit mo gagawin yung tama? Kasi yun yung natutunan tama. Yun yung lesson namin makaraan. Okay? As opposed to autonomy, okay? Autonomy, no? Last bullet. In Kantian philosophy, the capacity of an agent to act in accordance with objective morality rather than under the influence of desires. Okay? We could also understand autonomy if we compare it with the word heteronomy. Okay? Heteros means others. No? Marami. No? Di ba yung homosexuality, for example, okay? It means that you like the same sex. The same gender. Heterosexuality is you have an inclination to like those members of the opposite sex. Diba? Other, hetero. Kaiba sa iyo. Okay? So, heteronomy is moral childhood. Bakit? Kasi yung rule mo, hindi nanggagaling sa iyo. Nakikinig ka sa iba. While autonomy is moral maturity. Okay? Pinakikinggan mo, hindi yung iba, although sometimes yung pakikinig natin sa iba may tamang maidudulot. Of course, our parents, our teachers. But after hearing from them, you are able to assess within yourself. Tama ba ito by the dictates of my reason? Then that is autonomy. Autonomy then is a moral maturity. Okay? What does this mean? To autonomously, for example, not borrow money without intending to pay. To autonomously not lie about your credentials in your CV. To autonomously get the ticket instead of giving a bribe. Okay? So, tinanong natin yan lahat kanina, no? Okay? How do you respond to this? Do these actions in an autonomous manner. Okay? In a nutshell, no? We're ending our session today. Deontology is about acting from a sense of duty because it is the right thing. So yung kanina may nagtanong about goodwill. So nanggagaling yung goodwill? Dun sa sense of duty. You know that you have a goodwill if there is that autonomous sense that I will do this because it is the right thing to do. How do I find out what is right? By the universalizability procedure. Yung ginawa natin kanina ng 0, 1, 2, 3. When I know something is right, I do it because my reason binds me to do the right thing. Like 1 + 1 = 2. How do I accomplish doing the right thing? Autonomously. Okay? Ngayon, meron mga criticism sa deontology, no? Sinasabihin ng iba, old-fashioned, passé. No? Of course, merong gaps ang deontology. No? It does not respect culture. Okay? Some would say that it is only of historical importance, but not of decisive significance in our lives. Ano lang yan, pinag-aaralan lang sa ethics class yung deontology. Okay? Now, let me end by two things. Why do people do the wrong thing? Kasi ginagawa naman ng iba eh. Oh, yung iba nga, mas mahigit yung ginagawa. No? I remember this story, no? When I was in second year high school. No? Kung nag-aral ka sa public school, like me, uso yung mga teatro. No? Yung magbabayad ka ng ticket, tapos yung theater company re-renta ng teatro sa mall, tapos pupunta kayo doon. So, second year high school. No? Nanood kami ng teatro sa SM South Mall. No? I live in Muntinlupa. So, nag-commit kami magtotropa. Hanggang ngayon, ito pa rin yung mga tropa ko. Hanggang ngayon, solid kami. Yung isang tropa ko, hindi nagbayad sa jeep. Nung malapit na kami bumaba sa South Mall, so fairly 1 kilometer away, nanghingi siya ng sukli. Huh? Manong yung sukli po ng 50. Siyempre, tropa namin, no? Tahimik lang kami. Huh? Tapos pagbaba namin ng jeep, siyempre, kantsawan, pero tinanong ko siya, pre, hindi ka nagbayad, di ba? Tapos humingi ka pa ng sukli sa 50. Sabi niya, alam mo, maraming driver ang hindi nagbabalik ng tamang sukli. Ako na lang yung alay, no? Para ipaghiganti yung mga hindi nababalik ng tamang sukli. Other people do far worse. If it isn't illegal, it's ethical. Meron tayong ganyang notion eh. Diba? Pag hindi illegal, ethical na agad. If I don't do it, somebody else will. Tapos I have no choice. And then the second point, I'd like to read this quote. There are saints in the Roman Curia. Roman Curia, by the way, is the highest governing body of the Catholic Church, the one in Rome. Okay? Among the cardinals, priests, religious sisters, and laity. They work hard and also do things that are often hidden. I know some who concern themselves with feeding the poor or who give up their free time to work in a parish. As always, the ones who are not saints make the most noise. A single tree falling makes a sound, but the whole forest growing doesn't. Jorge Mario Bergoglio is now the present Pope Francis. Okay? Diba? Kapag yung tunay na matino ang ginagawa sa buhay, kahit hindi siya mag-ingay, gagawa siya ng matino. Pero yung mga tao na sobrang engrossed sa sarili nila, they would always announce whenever they do something good. And they're not doing it anymore for the sake of itself. They do good things because people will praise them. That's a hypothetical imperative. Categorical imperative is you do the right things because it simply is right. Kung purihin ka ng iba, if people praise you, that's just a secondary thing. If you with that, I end my lecture.